Everybody wants to be a cat, because a cat's the only cat who knows where it's at. Tell me, everybody's picking up on the feline beat, cause everything else is obsolete. I've heard some corny birds who try to sing, say the cat's the only cat who knows how to swing, who wants to dig along a gig and stuff like that, when everybody wants to be a cat.
What did we learn from week 1, 2, 3, and 4? Let's start with 1.
I think we learned from, well, I know what I learned from week 1 is that I think we can be really creative in our classes without having to really use technology, and that's what I learned from D&D, that if we can create some kind of simple role-playing activity, our kids can actually apply what they're learning.
Exactly. It's nice to have an option to include gaming without the high cost of technology that not every school has. And it's almost endless, the places that you could include role-playing within your own classroom.
Yes, and I was a little nervous the first week, but the D&D play let me know that maybe role-playing was something that I actually needed to incorporate more in my classroom.
Not only that, but the great part about week 1 was when we started to make our own games specifically for our classroom. It took me a minute to think about, I couldn't specifically use Dungeons & Dragons, but not only role-playing, but also thinking of making, like, my game is kind of like Dungeons & Dragons in the fact that it isn't necessarily like an online virtual world. So thinking creatively and using that aspect in my classroom, applying it to, I'm doing a poem based off Jack Perluski. So thinking creatively like that will be a really fun aspect to add to my classroom.
To me, Dungeons & Dragons really taught me about what I call open-ended creativity, giving the students an opportunity to start doing something together with an outline, but then having no boundaries to where that could go.
I completely agree with you both.
What about week 2? Week 2 we did, RuneScape. Today I was at Pandemonium at a bookstore coffee shop talking with some homeschoolers, and they were actually playing RuneScape for part of their homeschooling assignment because of some of the, I don't know if it was history or folklore, but they were telling me some of these tales that they'd actually learned from a history course they were taking, and some of it was incorporated into RuneScape. What did anybody learn for their classroom or just in general from week 2?
Wow, that seems like a neat way to incorporate it. What I was thinking with RuneScape is, for what I teach, I don't think that I could use it for like a history lesson because I don't use history, but I was thinking more just like skills that kids need, like patience or problem solving or even math skills you could learn within the game.
Yeah, I kind of felt that it was definitely a step up from the Dungeons and Dragons, and I agree with you on that, Carrie, how they can learn basic skills. I'd have to really play with it a lot more to see how I could apply it with the math part of it. I'm sure there's many ways, but it's kind of, you almost have to have that patience, like you mentioned, and actually have that dedication. And it would be nice to be able to say, okay, you guys got to, play so much per week, and then, have them reflect on it or, have them complete certain quests and so on. And maybe they can just learn to problem solve that way.
Week 2 also brought in the assessment and more of our reading, and I thought it was really great in Aldrich's book when in chapter 18 he said, why use grades anyway? And that was a really great chapter for our assessment, that we had to build an assessment. What do you guys think about how we would assess gaming?
Well, I think assessing gaming is something that requires a little bit more creativity, but I absolutely love the idea of no pencil and paper assessment. Of course, I've taken paper and pencil assessment out of my classroom a long time ago, but I love that I got the idea of using Facebook and screenshots instead of pencil and paper, even though the kids actually have to think of things and type them up and enter them on Facebook. It really fits what they're used to and what they like more than telling them to get out a pencil and piece of paper.
I really got a lot out of the assessment piece. One thing we always talk about is how to make learning relevant to our students. But this activity taught me that we also have to make our assessments relevant and real to our students. Why or how are the assessments important to our students?
I almost felt when I was making my assessment that, it's important to make it relevant to the students, like what you were saying, Bo, but I almost felt like you had to have a reason to give it. Like, why are you giving the assessment? So, I made mine oriented towards what we would have done. Say, go through the tutorial, try to complete a couple quests, and the assessment was based on that. What skills did you learn out of it, and maybe do a little bit of reflection, with the hope that the students would have taken the time to explore and actually try to complete some stuff. So I think when we do make our assessments, we also have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to assess, and ultimately what are we trying to see our kids progress in? I think that was really important when trying to determine what our assessments were going to be like.
I agree, and I think we all agree that we're all trying to move away from paper and pencil if we haven't already done so. And how you assess kind of depends on which game you're playing or what you're assessing. And I thought that RuneScape really lent itself well to assessment because of the tutorials and the quests and the way it kept track of skills. When I did my assignment on the assessments, I had the kids go through the tutorial and then go through different quests and take screen captures as they went, and then use those screen captures to kind of create a video, kind of like we do for assignments in our classes. That would kind of prove that they did the quest, and the reflections that they would also incorporate within the video itself.
And the creative assessments don't have to be limited to being creative when we do gaming. We can arrange creative assessment for whatever content we're teaching at the time.
Very true, not just gaming.
Everybody wants to be a cat